My brother disappeared when I was 12. That's the word my family always used, disappeared. Not vanished, not went missing. Just disappeared, like something that drifted out of frame and no one thought to rewind. The official story was simple and repeated so often it hardened into fact. He ran away. They said it casually, the way people talk about whether they can't control. He was difficult. Angry. Always in trouble. He didn't like rules. One night, he packed a bag and left. That was it. No mystery. No tragedy. Just a bad kid making a bad choice. I believed it, because everyone did. My parents told neighbors, teachers, relatives. They told it at family gatherings with practiced disappointment, shaking their heads as if his absence was proof they had tried their best. We did everything we could, my mother would say. Some people are just born wrong, my father added. When people asked questions, my parents shut them down quickly. The police were informed. A report was filed. He didn't want to be found. End of story. And because I was a kid, I didn't question it. You don't question the narrative you're handed when you're grieving and scared and still dependent on the people telling it. My brother had been 17. Old enough to leave, they said. Old enough to decide. But what I remember most clearly isn't the night he supposedly ran away. It's the morning after. His room was already cleaned out. His posters were gone. His clothes missing from the closet. His bed stripped and made with fresh sheets, like he'd never slept there at all. I remember standing in the doorway, confused, while my mother vacuumed the carpet. Didn't he leave last night? I asked. She didn't look up. He took his things with him, she said. That should have bothered me more than it did. But grief does strange things to your sense of logic. In the weeks that followed, my parents acted relieved more than sad. The house felt quieter, lighter. No more shouting. No more slammed doors. No more tension humming in the walls. They framed it as peace. He was poison in this family, my father said once. Now we can breathe. I absorbed that, too. I told myself my brother was selfish. That he didn't care enough to say goodbye. That he chose freedom over us. It was easier to be angry than scared. School counselors asked me how I was coping. I repeated what I'd been told. My brother ran away. He didn't want to be here. Adults nodded knowingly. Teen boys do that sometimes, they said. No one pushed further. Years passed. My brother became a family cautionary tale. Whenever I pushed back or got emotional, his name came up. You don't want to end up like him. We won't go through that again. After what your brother did, we expect better from you. His disappearance wasn't a loss anymore. It was leverage. By the time I was in my 20s, I barely talked about him. The story had calcified. I could recite it without emotion. Sometimes I even defended my parents when people reacted with discomfort. They did what they could, I'd say. You didn't know him. Then, one afternoon, I met a stranger who didn't know the story. I was at a bus stop in a town I'd moved to years after leaving home. It was raining lightly, the kind of rain that feels more like static than water. I was scrolling on my phone when a man sitting nearby glanced at my screen. It was an old photo. The only one I still had of my brother. We were kids in it, standing awkwardly side by side. He had his arm around my shoulder, his expression half annoyed, half protective. The man looked at it longer than was polite. Is that your brother? He asked. I nodded, already preparing the script. He ran away when I was a kid. The man frowned. That's strange, he said. I laughed lightly. Not really. He hesitated, then said something that made my stomach tighten. I think I knew him. That got my attention. He explained that he'd worked security years ago at a warehouse on the edge of town, my hometown. He'd seen the photo on my screen and thought the face looked familiar. What was his name? he asked. I told him. The man went quiet. Then he asked one question. Are you sure he ran away? The way he said it wasn't accusatory. It was cautious. Like someone stepping around something fragile. I felt defensive immediately. That's what my parents told everyone. He nodded slowly. Did you ever talk to him after? No. Did he take his phone? I didn't know. Did anyone ever hear from him again? No. The rain got heavier. The man looked uncomfortable now, like he'd already said too much. I'm probably mistaken, he said quickly. Forget I said anything. But it was too late. Because for the first time in my life, someone outside my family had reacted to the story like it wasn't normal. That night, I couldn't sleep. Small details started resurfacing, details I'd filed away as meaningless. How my brother never talked about wanting to leave. How he'd been grounded the week before he disappeared. How my parents never showed me a note or a message. How the police never came back with updates. How no one ever searched. I pulled up public records online. Missing persons databases. Runaway reports. There was nothing. No active case. No closed one. No mention of his name at all. The next day, I called my mother. Casually, I asked if there had ever been any updates from the police after my brother left. She paused. Just for a beat. No, she said. Why would there be? That pause stayed with me. It was small. Almost nothing. But it felt like the stranger's question echoing louder now. Are you sure he ran away? After that call with my mother, I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. Families pause. People hesitate. Memory gets fuzzy over time. I told myself I was projecting meaning onto nothing because a stranger had planted doubt. But once doubt exists, it doesn't stay contained. It spreads. I started by doing something I had never done before. I stopped asking my parents questions directly. Instead, I asked other people. I reached out to an old neighbor on social media, someone who had lived 2 houses down when we were kids. I didn't tell her why I was asking. I just said I was thinking about my brother and wondered if she remembered him. She replied quickly. Of course I do. Sweet kid. Quiet, but sweet. That already conflicted with the version I'd grown up with. I asked if she remembered the night he ran away. There was a long pause before she responded. I don't remember a night, she wrote. I remember an afternoon. Your parents arguing. Police car outside earlier that week. My chest tightened. Police car? I told her that couldn't be right. The police came after he left, I said. She sent back a message that changed everything. No, she wrote. I remember because I was bringing over a casserole. Your brother was sitting on the front steps. He looked scared. Not angry. Scared. I stared at the screen, my hands cold. She said she remembered asking my mother if everything was okay. She said my mother told her it was a family matter and closed the door. I had no memory of that day. Or maybe I did, and it had been buried under years of repetition. I kept digging. Teachers. Old classmates. A former coach. The story kept shifting depending on who I spoke to. Some remembered my brother talking about wanting to leave. Others remembered him talking about wanting to get through senior year. One teacher told me he'd asked for help, said home felt unsafe. Unsafe. That word echoed louder than anything else. Then I tracked down the man from the bus stop. It took some effort, but I found him through the security company he'd mentioned. When I told him who I was, he went quiet, just like before. I was hoping you wouldn't call, he said. He told me he'd seen my brother twice. Not running away. Working. Late nights. Off the books. Paid cash. He said my brother had a black eye the first time he saw him. I asked why he never reported it. He said he had. Not to the police. To his supervisor. The report went nowhere. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. The second time I saw him, he said slowly, he asked me how to get a fake ID. I asked if he ever saw him again. No, he said. But I remember asking him why he needed one. I held my breath. He said, because my parents won't let me come home. I drove to my parents' house the next weekend. I didn't tell them I was coming. I walked through the same front door I'd grown up with, feeling like I was stepping into a set built from someone else's memories. I asked to see the old police report. My father said there wasn't one. I told him I knew that was a lie. That's when the story finally fractured. They didn't confess all at once. The truth came out in pieces, each one worse than the last. They admitted there had been an incident. A fight. They said my brother had threatened them. They said he'd been out of control. They admitted the police had come. They admitted they'd told him to leave for the night, to cool off. They admitted they didn't expect him to actually go. But when I asked why they never reported him missing, my mother broke down. Because he didn't disappear, she said. My father finished the sentence. He was told not to come back. The room went silent. They hadn't searched because they knew where he was. They just didn't care to bring him home. When I asked why they told everyone he ran away, my mother said, it sounded better. That was it. That was the reason. It sounded better than saying they'd exiled their own son. It sounded better than admitting they'd chosen peace over responsibility. It sounded better than explaining to their remaining child that love in this family had conditions. I asked if they'd ever checked on him. My father shook his head. He made his choice, he said. I left without saying goodbye. In the weeks that followed, I filed a missing persons report myself. It went nowhere. Too much time had passed. No body. No evidence of a crime. Just a trail of silence and indifference. But something did come of it. Closure of a different kind. I stopped wondering why my brother never called. I stopped blaming him for leaving. I stopped telling the story the way my parents taught me. Now, when people ask about my brother, I say this. He didn't run away. He was pushed. And when they ask why my parents lied, I tell them the truth. Because lies are easier than accountability. Because erasing someone is sometimes quieter than admitting you failed them. Because if everyone believes the story long enough, it starts to feel real. Even to the people who invented it.